I have here these 3 leavening agents, and I often get asked the question, what is the difference between them and can we just interchange one for the other? I thought I would answer this question today because I get asked a lot. Baking soda, Eno's fruit salt. Many of you would have seen in many of the Indian recipes that need leavening, like dokla or instant idlis or any vada of any kind, you would see Eno. And then baking powder, of course, you see mostly in baking recipes. So what is the difference between these 3? And can you just interchange them in recipes? Well, obviously, the answer, as you might guess, is no. You can't interchange them. But they do have some common features. So let's start with baking soda because that's the ingredient in all 3 of them. That's the main leavening agent. So baking soda is essentially soda bicarbonate, and in the presence of an acid solution, which means water, it produces carbon dioxide, which is a gas, and that's what lightens or leavens your food. So for example, if I have dokla batter and I just put baking soda in it, if I don't have any acid like lemon juice or yogurt, then your dokla will be dense. It will not rise. But when you put lemon juice, now we have an acid in there and you'll get a nice fluffy dokla. So that's really baking soda. Obviously, as soon as the acid solution, meaning that you need water also, as soon as the acid and the soda come in contact, you will have carbon dioxide, which we shall see in our experiment. So when you use this, as soon as you mix that into your batter is wet, you have to put it into steam or bake or whatever it is. So that's baking soda. Eno is essentially a mixture of baking soda and an acid, in this case citric acid. So you don't need to add any other acidic medium in your batter. You just use Eno. So for example, if you're making dokla, which Eno is used in dokla a lot, you don't need to add anything else. You can just put the Eno and the water in the batter. You'll see it bubble right away. So the reaction will form right away. Therefore, an Eno batter, you have to mix it, put the Eno in just before you're going to steam it or bake it or whatever you're going to do. Because this is also mixed with citric acid, any recipe calls for a 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, but you'll need about, twice that, like 1/2 teaspoon of Eno in the recipe. But they can be interchanged and you don't need to have any acid in your batter. Baking powder is also baking soda based, but it's a little different. In its simplest form, baking powder is a mixture of baking soda and tartaric acid or cream of tartar. But it also has cornstarch. And this cornstarch actually slows down the reaction when you mix it put it in your batter. Usually you use baking powder in baking cakes or any other breads or what have you. And the same thing, as soon as it hits a liquid, the leavening reaction starts, but it is slowed down by the cornstarch or the corn flour. Nowadays in the market, you mostly get what is known as double-acting baking powder, which is what you usually use. So the double-acting baking powder, in addition to the cream of tartar or tartaric acid and the baking soda and the cornstarch, also has sodium aluminum sulfate. This is also acidic, but it does not actually react with baking soda until the temperature is a little higher, like 140 degrees Fahrenheit, which I think is 45 degrees centigrade. So until you put your batter in the preheated oven and the batter reaches a certain temperature, then you will start to see that rising action if you've observed a cake being baked in the oven. So that's the baking powder. Now, if I need to use baking soda and I only have baking powder, can I use it? Yes, I can. I would need to put 3 times as much, roughly, of baking powder, and then it sometimes can get bitter because of all the other additives in there. So It's not preferred, but you can. So I thought next I'm going to quickly show you what happens when you put each of these in water. Let's do some lab tests. Okay, well, there we go. Let's do our experiment. I'm going to take the same quantity of all these three. This is the baking soda. This 1 teaspoon measure. Quantity doesn't really matter, but it's for an experiment, we should be exact as much as possible. So we have to do these here. This is the ENO, and this is the baking soda, baking powder. Now, before we proceed, I'm just going to check out the texture. Baking soda is more or less like table salt, even a little finer maybe. And ENO is like a mixture of that table salt with some kind of powder, little coarse powder. And this, of course, is very smooth like cornstarch, as it has cornstarch, so that's probably why. Anyway, so now what we're going to do, first step is to just add plain water. And I'm just going to take a tablespoon of water and pour it on the baking soda first, and nothing happened. So it's really calm. And now let's take a look at what's going to happen with the ENO. Whoa. And this is the baking powder. You can see that that's also reacting, but not as effusively as the ENO. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep the water aside, and I'm going to take some vinegar, half a tablespoon, and pour it on this. Same reaction. Now this one here, we know that it can get more bubbly when put in warm water. I have a little bit of warm water here. Let's see what happens to that. It's bubbling, but I don't know whether you can see it, but the bubbles are forming now that the warm water is in there for the second action, and that's a slower reaction. We're done with the experiments, and I hope this video answered the questions about what's the difference between these three leavening agents and can you interchange them and how. Baking soda, ENO's fruit salt, and baking powder. I also wanted to, with this video, bust the myth that baking soda is bad and ENO is good. I have nothing against ENO, but that's the general feeling I see a lot, and actually they're the same thing. It's the convenience of ENO is that there is already acid in there, and so you can use it with any kind of batter. With baking soda, you have to be cognizant of the fact that you have to add some acid. That's the only difference. Otherwise, baking soda is much more economical and easy to get wherever. So that's it. And I plan to do a series on this sort of a video, which is answering these doubts or questions that we have in our minds and we don't really kind of, we just live with them. So if you have any such questions, please post them in the comments below, and I will try and find some answers for you. The one that I'm thinking of, for example, is what is the difference between a cast iron and the iron kadhai we use, and therefore how do we cook with either of them? Other than that, I'll see you again next week with another video. Until then, happy cooking and thank you for watching.